And we will go ahead and begin. So welcome to the January meeting of the statewide RTPA group. Today, our meeting is scheduled from 2 to 4. I'll do a quick screen share so we can look over the agenda, and thank you to all the people who have agreed to come and present to us today and all the input on the agenda from others. So our meeting is a virtual meeting. If you're speaking, please introduce yourself. If you're not speaking, please remain muted. We did have additions and changes to the agenda, just a couple under the Caltrans updates and they didn't get put in here yet, but they'd like to discuss the federal programs update, as well as an update to the certification program. So are there any other potential additions or changes to the agenda? We've got regular committees, the bipartisan infrastructure law, some discussion on the governor's proposed budget, some updates from the CTC and Caltrans, including ATP, STIP hearings, shop guidelines and shop hearings, the SB1 program update, and then Caltrans will talk about the ITSP addendum and stakeholder meetings, the Complete Streets policy update, again, local assistance updates, including the upcoming training day and the OA policy update. And then Angel is going to talk about the SB1 Cycle 3 Caltrans project prioritization. And under Federal Highway Administration, just kind of a quick discussion on inactive and initial obligation expenditures, how the state's doing in those, and just a brief update on the PE over 10. So any additional changes to the agenda or updates that anybody would like to propose? All right, so hearing none, we'll go ahead and look at approval of the meeting minutes from the December meeting. Ryan had sent those out previously. Any comments, changes proposed to the meeting minutes from last meeting?
Fantastic. Move to approve.
Perfect. Okay, so we will accept the meeting minutes from December. In terms of RTPA committees, I would like to thank Ventura County for stepping up as an alternate to the Local Street and Road Needs Assessment Committee. And I would thank Yvonne Garcia for agreeing to step into the primary role, which has been vacated on that committee very recently. So thank you, Heather, for volunteering to be the alternate. And thank you, Yvonne, for taking that over kind of mid-cycle. You and I can meet and talk about next steps. We will be probably seeing a poll before our March meeting on whether or how much interest there is in continuing support for that effort and the value of that report going forward. The other committees, some have not met since our last meetings, but I went ahead and put links just as a reminder. You're always welcome to check on the status of what these committees are doing. The last meeting minutes from each of these are on Caltrans website in various places. For the local HSIP advisory committee, the transportation co-op committee, and the strategic highway safety plan committee. We are still looking, by the way, for our alternates for the co-op committee, one north and one south. So if you are interested, please feel free to reach out. I didn't have time to tap shoulders quite yet on those. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the bipartisan infrastructure law implementation, and Nicole is here, and I am going to send out her updated deck to everybody right now. It has one additional slide. You're muted, Nicole, still. Sorry. There.
Hi. Give me just a second. I'm trying to pull up my presentation. There we go. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Right.
208 అయింది.
Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Nicole Longoria, Federal Liaison of the California Department of Transportation. Thank you for having me here today to provide an update on our efforts to implement the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which moving forward, I'll refer to as the IIJA. I haven't quite grasped the whole BIL acronym yet, so IIJA, here we go. Okay, just a little bit of an overview. I know there's a lot of information out here already, so I'm just gonna kind of breeze through some of the numbers. But as you all know, on November 15th, 2021, President Biden signed the IIJA into law. This historic $1.2 trillion legislation includes $550 billion in new spending, which you can see here in the darker reddish orange color.
I don't see your screen sharing, Nicole. Does
Oh.
anybody else? Am I just missing it on my end?
Oh,
No,
no.
it's not being shared.
It's
Yeah.
not being shared. Okay, let me minimize and start over. I'm sorry, what a drag. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. We see the full like PowerPoint, like your slides on
Okay.
the side and your notes and everything.
Okay, so let me go back. Is that a little bit better?
That's good. I see the full screen now.
Good. Okay. Okay, super. Sorry about that. I'm a little new to the Zoom stuff, so bear with me. Okay, so as I was saying, this is just a little bit of an overview on the IIJA. The darker orange color on the side, on the left side, is new programs. So that represents $550 billion in new spending for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. And then on the right side is just our annual spending on infrastructure projects. So the $650 billion there. This slide just gives a little bit more of a breakdown of how the $550 billion in new spending is divided. So this is between improving the surface transportation network. That's the $284 billion that you see at the top. Everything below there, the $266 billion, give or take a few billion, is for enhancing core infrastructure. So as everyone knows, this huge investment in funding, it's just crazy. And so delivery is paramount to its success. So thus we're focusing our efforts on implementing this legislation with you here at SANDAG and with our other California transportation stakeholders as well. So starting out with our implementation plan, we have convened an IIJA implementation working group. This group is being led by our cabinet level CalSTA, cabinet level agency, the California State Transportation Agency, known as CalSTA. Starting with our working group organization, we've reached out to a broad range of federal, state, local, and tribal government representatives and transportation, other transportation stakeholders to participate in this working group. But in addition to that, we also have an open door policy. And so this means that we will not turn away anyone who wants to participate in the working group meetings. And additionally, CalSTA has put up an IIJ implementation website. So here you will find IIJA analysis and working group meeting notes, meeting information, schedules, WebEx information, times, and eventually we'll have the IIJA transportation implementation action plans and other helpful materials as well. So I'll come back to this, this information in just a few minutes. So next, here's our meeting schedule for the next few months. Our initial kickoff meeting was held on December 17th, And our next meeting is actually tomorrow between 10 and 11. The call-in number that we use, as I referenced before, is at the bottom of this slide, as well as the web link. And this is the same information that we use for each meetings. So you can keep this information handy on your calendars, but CalSTA also sends out meeting notices that include this information as well. So as a subset of the full working group, Caltrans has formed 13 IIJ implementation sub-working groups. These groups are led by Caltrans policy leaders and subject matter experts. And here on the chart, I've listed all 13 of them here on the slide. So there's quite a few, as you can see. So we're trying to commence these kickoff meetings on a rolling basis, hoping to maximize participation and also trying to mitigate staff bandwidth issues, both internally and externally. I know we all have our normal jobs that we are doing right now as well, and this is an added workload. So we are being cognizant of that as well, and trying to space them out as much as we can. So these sub-working groups, they will meet as needed, and they will be providing updates to the larger working group meetings when they're held. These sub-working groups are going to be doing probably most of the heavy lifting, the real analytical work of the IIJA. They will be discussing implementation issues in their respective areas, determining whether new state implementing legislation is necessary, and then ultimately they will be developing IIJA transportation action plans that will be based on their discussions. So if you would like to join one of these groups, it still isn't too late. You can email myself, Nicole Longoria, my email's here, or you can also email Eric Firth. He is assisting with CalSTA staff right now. So either one of us can get you hooked up into the team's roster. I'd also like to point out that at this point, there's only been one group that has convened their kickoff meeting. The Freight and Goods Movement group met last week. And I believe this Friday, the transit and commuter rail and the intercity passenger rail meetings will commence. So as of right now, that's all that's, well, actually, no, that's not all that's going on. There's also a Fix It First one that's scheduled soon. So anyway, it's still early in the process. So please don't feel like it's too late to get involved if you'd like to. Lastly, as I referenced earlier, this is the CalSTA IIJA implementation website. This is their website address here that I think you have in your packet of information. There's a lot of information that's housed there. In addition to the meeting information, they've also started posting the US DOT notices of funding opportunities and other federal notices. And eventually, like I said, the Caltrans sub-working group implementation action plans will be housed here as well. So please bookmark the site and check it regularly, as it will be regularly updated. And with that, thank you very much. Here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and I will turn it back over to Dawn or take any questions if you have them.
Great, thank you, Nicole. I do see hands starting to go up. And so I will let some of these questions go first. They're probably going to be redundant to some of the things I was going to ask anyway, but go ahead and go, Chris.
Hey, Nicole, thanks for the slides. Sorry, I might turn off my video. I'm lagging. The timing in that calendar, to me, I just think about May revise and budget stuff. I mean, are we thinking that this action plan is something that's going to get incorporated in a proposal from the administration in the May revise, or do we have any sort of sense of what that looks like and what the mechanism is?
So yes, yes and no. So definitely we are eyeing the May revise. However, as we've been communicating with all of the other stakeholders internally, we need to go through this important process with our stakeholders as well and see what bubbles up. So, I mean, there's some obvious things that we may be looking at. I mean, some of the things that come to mind just off the top of my head are timing issues with some of the federal timelines for like the freight plan, for example. You know, those timelines don't sync up well with these state timelines. So, you know, things of that nature that are obvious, we may be able to get those conversations going prior to the work groups, you know, going all the way through their process, and bringing that to the attention now of the staffers so that we can start, you know, identifying and having the conversations that we need to move some of that forward. But, you know, we are going to let this process play out. So we will have, or we do have, state legislative staff that is participating in these working groups. And as soon as something is coming up, we are communicating that throughout the chain, through the director's office and up through CalSTA and onward and upwards. So, so yes, the first mechanism that we will be looking at is the May revise.
All right, anybody else with their hand up? If not, I'll go ahead and ask maybe the next question. Oh, well, Adrienne has her hand up, so go ahead, Adrienne.
Hi, this is Adrienne Cardoso with Orange County Transportation Authority. I'm excited about the transparency and the opportunity for involvement for all of the stakeholders to kind of work through these subcommittee or sub-working groups. I'm just a little, I'm concerned about what can be accomplished in such a large group. And I'm just curious if Caltrans and CalSTA are kind of planning on having separate meetings with kind of partners versus stakeholders, or if you're going to consider input from partners a little differently than maybe some of the folks who are not responsible for delivering federal aid projects or programming federal aid funds, who might have sort of a different perspective. I'm just curious how, if there's kind of a hierarchy in these sub-working groups, or how that's going to work.
So, so thank you, Adrienne. I appreciate the question. And I would say no, there is no hierarchy to participants. I mean, our goal is really just to be as inclusive as we can, and take back as much of the input as we can, and get to a place of compromise, you know, as much as possible, so that we can, you know, move forward. I think we have a really good track record with, you know, with using this type of a process in the past. When Giles Giovinazzi was the federal liaison, he used a similar process to, you know, to work to implement the FAST Act. And it's a little arduous. I mean, it's a lot of time, and it's a lot of meetings and a lot of work. But we have really found that, you know, once we kind of get through some fits and starts, the process does really work well. And you know, you come out with some really good fact sheets and action plans that we will be, you know, putting forward, and we'll just see what happens. But no, our goal is to be as inclusive as we can. There's definitely not a hierarchy to our partnership.
So I'm going to piggyback just a little. I mean, for these large, you know, inclusive working groups, I certainly understand and appreciate, you know, being inclusive, listening to all the perspectives. I guess, you know, my 2 cents is if there are some additional opportunities similar to this, to have discussions with partners who really, we develop our sustainable community strategies, we look at our long range plans, and we have a very vested interest in delivering, but we deliver as partners and not just stakeholders. We contribute a significant amount of funding to the system.
I'm sorry.
And to be able to have candid conversations around what it really takes to implement our sustainable community strategies in cooperation with Caltrans, the CTC, and CalSTA, I think is important. And that's just going to be my 2 cents.
Thank you. Appreciate your feedback.
Do we have any other questions for Nicole? we are going to have a little additional discussion on this with Keith and Paul as we move into the discussion on the governor's proposed budget and then some of these other areas. So I don't see any hands. Thank you so much, Nicole.
You're
To the
welcome.
rest of the group, I've gone ahead and sent out Nicole's updated PowerPoint. So you should have the current version. And thank you again, Nicole, for coming to speak with us.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone.
All right, I see Keith on the screen. I don't know if do we have Paul? Hey, Paul, welcome. So we've put kind of both Keith and Paul together for this item so we can kind of have a discussion on California transportation infrastructure, the budget, the governor's proposed budget, freight and goods movement at the ports, fuel and excise tax, CPI adjustment holidays, and then the CTC funding augmentation requests that were submitted in the fall. So it's a whole slew of financing. And I will let Keith and Paul kind of take it away, and then I've given a half hour for this, and then we can have hopefully some good Q&A within the time.
Well, thank you, Don, and happy Tuesday, everybody. Great job, Nicole. Paul, you want me to get started? I'll give the transportation infrastructure rundown.
Yeah.
All right. So the California transportation infrastructure package is over $9 billion of a variety of items. The majority of the items contained in the package are, I'll say, restated from this last May revised cycle. They weren't successful. It didn't garner the necessary legislative support. Some of those items included in the package, again, are high-speed rail, a little over $4 billion for high-speed rail, $2 billion for statewide transit and rail projects. And I'll rattle off the list, but I'll provide Don a summary as well as links to the actual packages themselves in case that may be useful, in case I may talk too fast, because I do have a tendency to do that. So $2 billion from the general fund for statewide transit and rail projects.
The formatting on this document and lost a bunch of the work.
Can everyone please mute their microphones?
Then we got, thank you, Don. We've got another $1.25 billion dedicated for Southern California transit projects for both local and regional projects within the TIRCP. Another repeat is another $500 million to support high priority grade separation projects. Another $400 million for climate adaptation, sea level rise, resiliency. I know there's a lot of different words we can use associated with that. And of that $400 million, the intent is half of that through local agencies and half of that through the state. And then one of the last repeat items that definitely is not last for any reason, the continuation of the $500 million for the ATP, Active Transportation Program. So that is intended to kind of augment the last cycle. So those high scoring projects that we just didn't have enough funding for to be able to fund those projects. The new items that are included in the transportation project, they're kind of loosely associated with active transportation and within that umbrella. There's $150 million for reconnecting communities. More specifically, it's for a Highways to Boulevard pilot program. That program is identified in the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, CAPTI. And that's for basically the conversion of underutilized highways into multimodal corridors. I can't say that as fast as I can, but to convert some of our underutilized highways into corridors that use active transportation methodologies. There's another $100 million that will be flowing through the Highway Safety Improvement Program specifically for bicycle and pedestrian safety projects. And the intention there is to split it 50-50. So by the math, 50 million of that would go through state projects, and for 50 million would go through local agencies, through local assistance projects for bike and ped. Another new item that's included in this package is another $100 million for the Clean California program. And this $100 million is specific to the local grants portion. As many of you may recall, the Clean California proposal was initially asking for $1.5 billion over 3 years, so $500 million a year. But as part of the negotiation process or part of the legislative review process, the local grant program, the request for 300 million was only approved at 200 million. So this 100 million is just intended to fully fund that original intent. We understand there's a lot of interest. The grants haven't been awarded yet. I believe we're looking at a target of next month. So this 100 million will definitely help in being able to meet those grant needs. And then lastly, as kind of a placeholder included in this package is the additional money through the highway formula funding through the passage of the IIJA or the BIL. We're looking at about $1.8 billion built into the current year and about $1.9 billion built into the upcoming budget year. As a placeholder, I believe I heard one of the questions and I couldn't log on quick enough to help assist Nicole in some of the responses. As a placeholder, as part of the January 10 budget, it was split the traditional 60-10, 60% going through the state within the non-shop appropriation and 40% through for local agency use to the local assistance appropriation. That is intended to be a placeholder while these working groups take place. And then the initial intent would be to whatever decisions have been finalized at the time of May revise, we would just incorporate that into the May revise process and then later into the budget that would be enacted by July 1. So I'll pause there in relation to the transportation package. I don't know, Paul, if you had anything or if there's any questions, Don, and then I jump to the next item or just jump to the next item.
I guess I'll look to Paul and see if there's anything he wanted to add now, or if you want to just let me open it up for questions.
Just a couple comments. So I think, from CTC perspective, obviously, I think we're very pleased that there's, significant general fund investments being proposed for transportation, even higher than last year. So that's great. And a lot of the, priority areas targeted for investment, active transportation, transit, supply chain are issues that the commission's been focused on as well. We're still also, I think, kind of trying to, get up to speed on the governor's budget and exactly what all the proposals, sort of the intricacies of how they're going to work. Couple, thoughts just to share right now. I think we're still, for us, trying to understand, what would be the commission role in terms of some of these new funding streams, like for, the supply chain proposal and things like that. As you all know, traditionally, the commission's been the main agency to program and allocate funds. I think in this case, it seems like a lot of the funding would flow under CalSTA, at least for the programming. And I think we're just trying to understand what the commission role would be exactly, as well as how, how some of the new funding streams proposed would sort of coordinate with some of the existing ones. So, we have the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, and there's this new proposal for supply chain funding. And so how is that gonna, sort of be aligned and coordinated? So those are some of the questions that we have, as well as, I think the increased funding levels are great. Well, I guess a little later on the agenda, you had the CTC funding augmentation. So maybe I'll hold off my comments on that for now.
You're welcome to put them in here if I'm fine to have those discussions here. It's up to you.
Oh, yeah, or I don't know if we're gonna wait can I have some comments on the gas tax too, or I don't know. It seemed like we're pausing after.
Okay, that's fine. So questions, I'm looking for any hands or questions for Keith on the initial portion. I am just wondering, Keith, I haven't seen your subgroup schedule for the 60-40 split. I'm wondering if you have, if you've been working on that schedule and when we might be able to see that particular schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the precursor to the next one, as Nicole was mentioning, the sub-working groups are looking to get kicked off. So I'll be sending a notice out. I did receive my listing of, I believe right now I'm sitting at 39 people that have expressed interest in participating in that sub-working group. And being Nicole has invited others, we might be able to increase it even more, which is great. Looking at roughly the second to and the fourth week of February, I'll be reaching out to everybody, sending them a quick note, just kind of introduce the general plan, try to see if there's a certain date or time frame looking at, initially looking at about a 2-hour meeting for each of those meetings. The idea is let's take a look at what we have been doing with those existing formula programs. What is the current split within the FAST Act, or this most recent split within the FAST Act within each of those programs? Identify lessons learned, opportunities or challenges, both from the state and the local delivery side from that, and then dig right in. Here's the new funding within those existing programs, as well as here's the new programs that have come into play. I know we just, I think it's been about a week and a half ago, we just got the details related to the new bridge program. The EV infrastructure details are still kind of pending, but I know FHWA is working feverishly to get things in place. One of the hiccups for them in relation to the overall funding is we don't technically have an official federal budget in place for the current federal fiscal year. They're still operating off a continuing resolution. And that continuing resolution just means we're going to take last year's budget and carry it over to this year. So we are working on FAST Act funding levels. So that's kind of a challenge there. The fun part, I say fun part because there's a variety of ways I can say complicated and everything else when it comes to this new money identified within the IIJA. All of the core existing formula programs are funded through the Highway Trust Fund, Federal Highway Trust Fund. The new bridge and EV infrastructure programs are funded through the general fund. So they come in with a little different timelines. Our core formula programs, we have our normal 1 year to obligate so we can qualify for August redistribution. For the bridge and EV funding programs, those being general fund, we have a couple, we have I think 3 years to obligate those funds. And I'll get those specifics out there as part of this discussion when we do start these sub-working groups. So just those little nuances, just to kind of level set, making sure we're all on the same page, we all understand what's going on. We know there's a lot of local assistance. Caltrans Local Assistance has been working for updating their OA policy. I know that's later on the today's agenda, but there's a lot of different things when it comes to the complicated matter when it comes to federal funding. So want to try to spend some time just to kind of level set, make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to what we've been doing, and then move forward to see what we can do. The general idea is we've been operating off of 60-40. So it's kind of that balancing act. If we increase one, decreasing the other. But that's also part of that discussion that we'll be having as part of that core group. But you can expect a meeting invite, or at least a notice to be sent out later this week. And like I said, we're aiming for the 2nd and 3rd week of February.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that clarification on the schedule. Just want to remind the folks on the line that we have established a subgroup within the RTPA group that and submitted names to Keith to participate. And we'll be making sure that we're providing a feedback loop. I had sent out a survey for RTPAs specifically to answer so we can actually set up a separate email group that doesn't go to the broader distribution. If you didn't have a chance to answer that, please look back in your email. Also, this past week, we've had a lot of folks have the mail going to their junk mail. So look there if you don't recall seeing it, please. All right, Keith, go ahead. I don't see any hands on questions in the interim, so go ahead.
All right, so the next item, the official name of this proposal is identified as Freights and Good Movement, Supply Chain Resilience and Port Infrastructure Investments, another mouthful. Included in that package is $1.2 billion to invest in port freight and goods movement projects. There's various project needs, obviously, to make the movement of goods more efficient and effective. Of that $1.2 billion, 70% is going to infrastructure projects for ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. So that's about $850 million of that total. And about 30%, or a little over $350 million, is going to supporting ports and goods movement in a variety of other ports throughout the state, including inland ports. That's one of the additions that we wanted to make sure that we highlight. It's not just the seaports, but the inland ports as well. Included in this proposal is $110 million for the California Workforce Development Board. Basically, what they're looking to do is establish a goods movement workforce training campus. Currently, the port employers, the LA Port Authority, I believe it's let me see if I read it right, International Longshore and Warehouse Union. They have a current program that they're looking to train a lot of their workers, not only to bring them up to speed on the latest technologies, but also related to just the aging workforce and bringing the next wave of workers into play. So they're looking to dedicate funding to training those existing workforce. So that's definitely a unique investment that we're looking to go into. They're also including about $40 million for the DMV to enhance, to increase the number of CDLs that they can issue. Obviously, part of the goods movement includes truck drivers, so getting commercial driver's licenses out as quickly as possible. So that money is dedicated for overtime on the weekends, additional testing centers, testing driving centers in the Bay Area and northern Los Angeles County areas. So we're definitely looking at that investment. And then lastly, there's an investment of about $30 million dedicated for information. There's a variety of information available within the ports, being able to have that access to the information to make strategic decisions in relation to where any log jams are when it comes to goods movement. So there's dedication to that, just information, IT systems and such things as that. So that's an item that we're definitely excited for on behalf of the administration. And I'll slowly pause as I take a breath, then I'll go to the next item, the fuel excise tax CPI adjustment. All right, no hands, so we'll jump to it. So as part of the governor's proposal released in January, the governor's proposing what referred to as a holiday or a pause in relation to the CPI adjustment. As everyone knows, with the passage of SB 1, it not only did it identify new factors to the excise tax for both diesel and gas, but it also included an annual inflationary increase. For this upcoming fiscal year, July 1st, we were looking at about a CPI increase of about 5.6%. We know inflation's kind of crept up a little higher than the average of about 2 to 3%. But based on current CPI data, we were looking at an increase of about 5.6% to both gas and diesel. That would have equated to a 3-cent increase in the gas excise tax and about a 2% increase in diesel. The administration is proposing to put a pause on that. So basically keep the existing rates that we have now for the upcoming fiscal year. That pause would result in about a $525 million of loss. We say loss revenue just because we wouldn't receive that inflationary increase. It equates to about, I think it's about $75 million in diesel excise tax loss, and the rest about 450 in gasoline tax excise loss. As part of this pause, anything lost on the local side, basically we're going to take a step back. All the state transportation revenue for both excise tax, in essence, it goes 50% to state, 50% to local agencies. As part of this proposal, that loss of 50% to the local side will be completely backfilled through the state highway account. So the local system, LSR, local streets and roads program, the direct distributions of cities and counties from state controller's office, the RTIP, regional transportation improvement program, all that funding that would come through the local agencies that could be lost as a result of not having this holiday. That funding would be backfilled with state highway account funding. So there's still some investigation going into that regarding what legislation may be needed to make that work, but that's the general idea right now. And then this would be a 1-year pause effective this July 1, and then the following July. Not only would this 5.6% increase take effect, but whatever this inflationary increase that would take effect in for that upcoming year would also be added to it. So we'd be able to be caught up a year from now. I'll pause there. There's a fun one. I see a hand there.
Yeah, hands are going to really go up on this one, I think, because that's a pretty big increase in 2 years to absorb. I saw David Chan's hand up first, so go ahead, David.
Keith, I understand the backfilling on the pause for the fuel tax, but isn't there a requirement under the law for that? So how are they going to get around that, even if they're going to backfill the local portion?
That's part of the mechanics that they're working through right now. I haven't received any details regarding what will need to take place for this pause to be implemented. So I don't have any details on that, but I can definitely work to get that. Once I receive anything, I'll be happy to share it through Don and the team.
So conceivably,
sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, well, conceivably, if they cannot find a legal maneuver to get around that, I mean, the pause may not happen then.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Correct. If no problem. Yeah. If statute restricts it and there's no way around it, or there's no way to establish or enact new legislation to be able to make this happen, then yes, it would basically be withdrawn.
Hey, Dawn, this is Bill Higgins.
Yeah.
I can answer that really quick. The pause is created by statute and it can be amended by statute in a trailer bill. That's not constitutional. So that can be done.
All right. Thanks, Bill. So we'll move on to Adrian.
Hi, Adrienne Cardoso again with OCTA. Keith, I think I heard two things which I like, but I have a question. I just want to confirm. The local funds that would be backfilled due to the pause on the gas tax would include STIP. I think I heard that. And then I also heard that after the 1 year pause, the next year it starts up again, it would recover the 5.6% or whatever the inflationary would have been. So we don't, we're not starting at a lower place, right? Is that correct? Okay, now I have my question.
Correct. Yeah. All right.
So, right. So the STIP funding that the STIP funding that comes into the STIP now is excise tax, gas excise tax, which has a constitutional kind of umbrella over it that limits how it can be used. Would the backfill funding have that? And if it doesn't, is it still subject to all of the STIP requirements? Maybe this is a CTC and Caltrans question, but I'm just curious if if it would still adhere to the existing STIP requirements if it's no longer a gas tax. Thanks.
And actually, to that point, Keith, maybe can you clarify, because I think our understanding is STIP would be considered state funds and would not be backfilled, that the backfill would be for the local portion.
The local portion would be backfilled.
So would the STIP funding be backfilled?
Right now, the way the STIP is looking right now, and this is where I can expand even further to probably complicate the response. While this pause would result in a lost revenue of about $525 million across both revenue sources, based on Department of Finance revenue forecast, in the current year, we're looking at an increase in the revenue forecast of almost $600 million, meaning the recovery from the pandemic from a gas consumption and diesel consumption is increasing a lot higher than originally thought. So we're looking at an increase of total revenue of about $600 million. And then for the budget year, this upcoming budget year, we're looking at an increase anywhere from $500 to $550 million. So there is some offsetting in that regards there. Overall, when it comes to the STIP, this by itself, this pause by itself could potentially impact the STIP. But when it comes to the STIP, what we do is, as everyone may recall, the commission adopted the fund estimate back in August based on revenue data revenue forecast we had at that point in time, established the allocation capacities for both the STIP and the SHOP, and both STIP and SHOP are moving forward with that. There's always those ebbs and flows that may happen between fund estimates. So while we're looking beyond the next fund estimate period to see how this can potentially impact future capacity, right now we're not looking at this impacting capacity for this current cycle that Teresa and team within CTC and Caltrans teams are working on for both the STIP and the SHOP. So I know we're kind of focused on just the STIP portion related to this holiday or this proposed holiday, but overall we're still working off the allocation capacity levels that were adopted back in this last August.
Okay,
so I don't know if that more holistic response.
Do you mind if I just kind of state back what I think I got from that? So in 21-22, the revenues that are coming in potentially for the STIP are higher than what was originally in the fund estimate, so much so that they might make up for the suspension in 22-23. So there is no plan to backfill the STIP for the lost revenue in 22-23. Is that correct?
For the state portion, yes, that's correct.
Wait, so the state portion, are you talking about, you're talking about the entire STIP, right? Being part of the state
I'm talking
portion,
about
or are
the
you
entire
talking?
Yeah,
Okay, okay, thank you.
yeah, I'm sorry about that. I was
Okay.
going down a different path.
Yeah, it's too bad that the STIP won't get to benefit from, you know, the surplus or the gas tax revenue increase, which has occurred recently, that will just be held steady. If there's any way that we could be backfilled or included, I think that would make this, you know, something that would just help us a little more. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, I see Patricia's hand next.
Hi, quick, simple question. So I just want to verify, it's not just that in 22, we're not anticipating changes to what we can allocate within the STIP, but also in 22, 23, is that right? That, so for the whole fund estimate period, we do not anticipate a change?
Correct.
Thank you.
At this point in time, we're not proposing any changes. Yes.
So Keith, what was the, when the fund estimate was prepared for 22, 23, what was the anticipated CPI adjustment? I mean, now that we're looking at like it would be around this, you know, 5%, what was the fund estimate level that was assumed?
I believe it was around 3.5%, but I'll get that back to you.
Okay. So yeah, I would just echo Adrian, it's really a shame that, you know, the RIP shares won't benefit from a potential, you know, larger adjustment that can flow, even if it's not into this year, but into the STIP as a whole, because, you know, I'll say it again and maybe check for any opposing comments from my fellow RTPAs, but I think I would like to, you know, just address this at tomorrow's meeting in the report that, you know, we had the presentation and we understand, and that, you know, that particular area of backfill would be really beneficial to see to deliver on, you know, our commitments that we need to make to meet our goals that we're trying to achieve on behalf of our regions and the state. And I will pass it over to Sarkis for a moment.
Hey Keith, hope you're doing well. Once you said holiday, you had me daydreaming about vacation. So, but I stepped out of it. I did have a question. Typically, you provide a PowerPoint for the commission on what's going on with the budget. Is that something that you may have that could visualize what's going on with this holiday?
Let's see what we can put together.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
For tomorrow, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because Adrian's questions help me out, and then your responses clarified things. But when I have to explain this to elected officials, it could get really messy in terms of trying to explain it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, tomorrow's presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Presentation for the commission. I was just going to say tomorrow's presentation for the commission meeting, part of the presentation will just have a mid-year revenue update, just to show that we are a little higher through the mid-year than original forecast, and then just kind of share the latest forecasts is that roughly 600 million higher for the current year. But let's see what we can try to put together for that. Thank you for the feedback.
We have Rachel and then Mike Woodman.
Thanks, you guys. This might be more a question for Paul on what changes you think would be necessary. Is it to the fund estimate assumptions or CTC policy or state law in order to for the RIP shares to benefit from the increase in gas consumption recovery, increased gasoline revenues that have been coming in reality? Or I guess I'm with Sarkis. I'm really excited to see a chart that breaks this down a little bit more, because I am having a hard time following it. Thanks.
Yeah, well, you know, we do the fund estimate every 2 years, so I don't know if the revenues aren't always exactly what's in the fund estimate. I think what Keith is saying is they're currently tracking higher than what was assumed, but you know, it's the fund estimate's kind of like a multi-year forecast, and what sort of is happening right now is just, based on a shorter timeline. So I don't know. It's a good question, Rachel. I'd have to think about it a little bit more, I guess.
All right, Mike, or do you have any follow-up, Rachel? Or are we okay with?
And that was helpful. Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to Mike.
Hey, Keith, Mike Woodman with Nevada County Transportation Commission. I understand the potential backfilling local revenues on a one-time basis. However, I support Sarkis's idea of preparing some kind of PowerPoint presentation. I'd like to see with, the backfilling those on a one-time basis with state highway account funds. What are the impacts of that? And then it seems to me that Article Section 7. Thanks, Logan. The article of the Constitution that requires a backfill of any reduced or repealed fuel taxes would also apply to the state side. So just trying to wrap my head around all of this, and the more light you can shed on this on potential impacts and how we weave our way through this would be beneficial.
Understood. I appreciate the feedback, Mike. Yeah, with legislation, the Constitution, everything to that nature, that's where I'm relying on my friends at the Department of Finance to provide me the feedback on that regards there. When it comes to the whole, making sure what are those impacts? If this holiday is going to impact us a total of 525, and I know that's an estimate, 525 million of less revenue, half for this local, half for the state, making sure that the local side is made whole was the focus when this was initially brought up. From a state's perspective, yes, there would be in essence a hole, but given as mentioned, the increase in forecast revenue, even outside of this holiday, as well as the increase in federal funding associated with the IIJ, see a lot of mitigating factors that will help this. We don't see if any impacts are experienced from this. We're still probably 3 to 4 years out. And at the same time, if forecast revenue or continue to increase higher than what was originally intended, I think should be able to compensate for that aspect. But that's still trying to be investigated right now or researched right now.
Well, and then backfilling on the local side with the state highway account, what programs would that impact?
It would primarily on the state side would be the shop. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to the state funding that comes to us of this 50-50, as the money comes in, it's shop and maintenance. That's where we could potentially feel the impact if it wasn't for these other items, kind of offsetting it for us.
Okay, well, hopefully Prop 22 protects that.
All
Appreciate
right.
the feedback.
So Maura, I saw your hand up and it went down. Do you want to have an outstanding question? Or are you fine?
No, it was answered. Thank you.
Okay, great. We are starting to run just a little behind. So I'd like to just move on quickly to Paul, just his thoughts on the CTC funding augmentation request as they were submitted and as it came out in the proposed budget.
Yeah, so I think as all of you may remember, we had proposed $2 billion augmentation for active transportation program, and the proposed amount is 500 million. So, we are obviously pleased to have an increase, but it's not really going to get us anywhere close to what the need in the program is. So, we are hopeful as we look ahead to the May revision, maybe if revenues come in higher, we can kind of still make the case to get the $500 million up, closer to what our request was. And we had also requested some funding for transit and rail projects in the STIP, which was not included in the budget. So, again, one of the reasons why we had proposed that was due to the lack of public transportation account funding in the STIP. We haven't had any new PTA funds, which provide a lot more flexibility. They don't have the other restrictions that some of the other funds do. So we're hopeful to get some money with general fund, but that's something that, you know, again, as we look ahead to the May revise, and if there's more revenues, hopefully we can get reconsideration.
All right. Any comments or questions as we wrap this item up and move into our regular CTC updates? All right, seeing none. Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you, Paul. We very much appreciate your being here and presenting and discussing these items with us today. We're going to go ahead and move on to Lori Waters on the ATP update. Is Lori here with us?
I'm right here. Can you see me?
Great. Now I can. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Hi, Dawn. Hi, everybody. So I'll make it kind of quick because I think everybody pretty much knows what's going on. We are, I'll be presenting the draft 2023 ATP guidelines at the meeting tomorrow. As you know, we're really trying to keep the program pretty consistent with last cycle because there were so many unsuccessful applicants. So there are not a lot of major changes. The biggest one is the project threshold size, and we're doing that at the request of the stakeholders. Other than that, Commissioner Liu had a couple things that he wanted us to include, so we'll do that. And that was it on the guidelines, if anybody has any questions. And then I was gonna, oh, Peter has a question, I think.
Yeah, Peter has his hand up, so go ahead. You're muted again, Peter. It looked like you unmuted and then muted.
There. Okay. Yes, I had a question. I jumped the gun. I had a question about the fund estimate, which you're not there, but since I'm talking, I guess I'll just say it, which is, and it may be in there, and maybe if I'd read it, I would know the answer, but talking about IIJA, there's a significant increase for the Transportation Alternatives Program, which is a big part of ATP. So the question is whether that increase in the IIJA, whether that's already feeding into cycle 6 for the fund estimate.
Yeah, so there's going to be a draft fund estimate as well. And I don't know if Keith is still on, because so I'm not sure which fund estimate is posted right now. I'll have to look at that, because there was one that was there was a error on it, so it was going to be reposted. I don't know if the new one's reposted. So there is an increase from the I whatever that is. But it may not be what you think. I don't. Not sure if Paul or Keith are still on.
Yeah, Laura, this is Keith. It's
Yeah.
that we've got an increase of $40 million associated with the IIJ BIL at this
But
time.
which fund estimate is, did the revised one get posted yet? I don't know.
I'll have to check online. So to Lori's point, the initial fund estimate that for the ATP, or the draft fund estimate that was posted this past Friday, that had the error. What we hadn't done is, we know that for the first 2 years of the ATP fund estimate, we have what's already been programmed. So that's a commitment that we need to set aside funding for. But for the upcoming, the latter 2 years of the 4-year period, that we typically reserve about $100 million for those future cycles to be able to program additional projects in the future. So that reservation for those latter 2 years, we did not incorporate that into the initial fund estimate that was posted on Friday. So I believe it was supposed to be posted last night, if not this morning, Lori, but we'll have to check that out.
Okay, so Peter, make sure you're looking at the revised one, not the original one that came out, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
All
Yeah,
right. It's like oh, sorry. Go ahead, Paul. And
Oh,
then
I was just
we'll
gonna
go
make,
question from
yeah,
Shelley Kwan.
one more thing to keep in mind. So the increase, the $40 million increase for ATP is just from the increase from the Transportation Alternatives Fund. It's possible, you know, there's the IIJA work group process going on that Nicole talked about earlier. And, you know, I think it's possible that, you know, there are some other new federal funding streams that, you know, I think potentially could augment ATP. So just wanted to mention that.
All right, thanks, Paul. Shelley?
Hello. Hi, Lori. First of all, congratulations to you and the team for getting to a set of draft guidelines, and particularly for the efforts to stabilize the program by avoiding major changes. My comment is on language that is in the draft guidelines now that disallows the scope changes after construction allocation. I think, it's very clear that the competitive nature of the ATP requires an increased focus on the delivery of projects as originally awarded. But I think project sponsors can experience unforeseen situations sort of beyond their control, and after construction allocation, once shovels hit the ground even, that requires changes to the original project scope. So the specific project outputs might need to differ from what was originally applied for, but the project benefits themselves are the same or even greater from the original application. So if the guidelines could allow these types of changes that arise from unforeseen circumstances that don't reduce project benefits, we could potentially avoid situations where a project is denied a change that it really needs to make and has to be deleted from the program, and the project benefits get delayed or never realized potentially. So I just wanted to bring that up again. I know it was discussed heavily at the workshop, and probably you've heard it from others since then. But yeah, thank you for always listening and thoughtfully responding.
Yeah, I'm going to see, because I'm not sure how to answer that question now. I don't know if Teresa's on, because I would have answered it differently yesterday than I would today. So, Teresa,
I'm here. I am
Okay.
here. You know what, Shelley, although we recognize wanting to add a little more flexibility, and this is a very competitive program, as I said in the workshops, and we don't lack projects. And so really the expectation is for you to deliver the project that was evaluated and awarded. At this point, we will not be recommending removing that that particular provision in the guidelines. But we're still going to have additional workshops, and we can still have the conversation.
Okay. As long as the conversation channels are open, I think we appreciate that.
Yeah, we can continue talking, but at this point, no. We talked about it with our executive management, and they also agreed that we need to set up a process that has been occurring, and it's just formalizing the process. And so we feel very, very strongly about the integrity of the program and how the projects are evaluated and scored and awarded. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
So Dawn, I just wanted to mention one other thing. So wanted to let everyone know that we have been doing site visits for the program for the upcoming cycle, and our site visits have been way more successful than we ever anticipated, and we used up all of the spots that we had, plus way more. So Alika was just fitting in site visits wherever she could. So unfortunately, we actually have 0 time left to do any site visits. So we had to kind of shut that down, unfortunately. So, but they've been great. So it's been really good. It's just that they take a lot of time, and we're doing a lot of them. So that was the only other thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah, and Lori, I presume then that when you get additional contacts, you're just doing your best to refer them to resources on the, through the resource center or through their MPOs. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, and if somebody really begs and is super nice to Alika, she might be able to squeeze another hour out somewhere too. But yeah, there's always other resources that we can refer people to. Thanks, Dawn.
Well, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to Teresa and the STIP hearings.
Yes, so we have our first STIP hearing on Thursday after the commission meeting. We do anticipate the hearing, the CTC meeting not to go very late, so it will start immediately after. We will be publishing the hearing book. We're targeting for close of business today. We will send a note to Dawn so that and a link to the website. Good news is that the proposals are below the capacity. Those are the really good news. So all your, if eligible, all your projects we will be able to program it. The only struggle we have, as in prior years, is that everybody wants their project in the early years of the STIP. So we are way over programmed in the first, actually in year 2 and 3. So that's going to be the challenge. So if you already know, if you propose the project, a new project, specifically a new project, in the early part of the STIP, and if you don't have a project to delay, most likely we will not be able to accommodate. So I'm going to talk about all that at the hearing, and so that's all I wanted to say. If you are, you want to speak, just let Casey Ruggiero know. And the South hearing is going to be on Thursday, and all is virtual, sadly. That's all I have. Thank you. And you know what? I do appreciate your comments on the STIP. I agree with you. If there is a surplus, the STIP should be benefiting from that surplus, from the additional revenues. So thank you very much, Keith Duncan. Because really we have very little funding, and it just keeps on getting smaller and smaller. So if the revenues are more than anticipated, we should be able to, the STIP should be able to benefit, because it's a result of the fund source. And I see Peter raising his hand because he's supporting me, huh, Peter?
Oh, no, I think
Yes,
maybe wanting to clarify.
Say, illustrates the point that was being made earlier that, although there is there's enough money for the entire STIP, it looks like it's short in year 2 and year 3. And, if the STIP could be backfilled from a gas tax holiday, meaning more money than was estimated in the fund estimate, then, that money could get put to use in year 2 and year 3.
Thank you. And you know what, to your point, I was just going to say that if we happen to have higher, because we have an allocation capacity and a programming capacity, right? We are working with the programming capacity that was given to us in the fund estimate. But if the allocation capacity is a lot higher, so although we push the project out in later years, we may have the ability to advance the project. So that would be the benefit of benefiting from a higher revenues.
Yeah, so Mike, before you ask your question, I just want to confirm. So Teresa, can you give us the dates? You said this Thursday is the first, and then the second STIP hearing is?
The second hearing is on February 3rd in the afternoon at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay, so let Casey know if you'd like to speak on behalf of your region. Thank you, Dawn.
Great, thanks. And then we'll go ahead to Mike and then Rachel.
Yeah, and thinking about the gas tax holiday, this is more for Keith to take back. It seems like, for that one-time local revenue backfill, why would we have that come from the state highway account when we have a surplus and have that impact the shop? That should come from the surplus. And plus Article, Section 7, Article 19 of the Constitution protects all those funds and says they have to be repaid. So it needs to either come from the general fund or the surplus. So I don't know.
Rachel?
Message.
Similarly, I was just hoping that the additional revenues could be split 44, 44, 12, with the STIP getting 44% of whatever surplus there is this year from gas tax revenues. But also just, Teresa, can you just reiterate, so the hearing book with the summary of all of CTC staff's comments and questions will be coming out later today, is that right?
Yes, we are close to business. We will be posting it on our website. I'm gonna have, we will send out Dawn a note so that she can send it out to all of you, just letting you know that the hearing book is posted. Okay.
Fantastic, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all for all your responses to our comments. And yep, we're almost there.
Mike, did you have one more thing? Oh, okay, your hand was still up. I just wanted to confirm and double check. With that, we're going to go ahead and move on to John Prey on the shop guidelines and shop hearings.
Don, could I ask a quick question of Teresa before she takes off?
Yes.
Hey, Teresa, do you have a crystal ball? Do you have an idea of when you think the Northern California hearing might start?
Well, we were speculating amongst us friends. The agenda is a little not as heavy, the CTC agenda. So we were hoping to 11:30 or so. And, normally the hearings, they go for about an hour to an hour and a half. We wanted the chair or my management wants to start immediately after the hearing. I mean, after the commission meeting. So, but, we always say the CTC meeting is not going to take a long time and something just happens. And
so did I hear right? No break for lunch. We would just go right through it all.
Yeah, I don't think there will be, maybe a little break, a 15-minute break from one to the other.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, bye.
All right, do we have John on to talk about the shop guidelines? Oh, hi, John.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm not on these things all the time, so I know a lot of you, but not all of you. My name is John Prey. I'm on the engineering team at the CTC here. And I wanted to let you know that there's 2 shop items coming to the January commission meeting, which you may have seen on the agenda. There's shop guideline updates. These are both draft items and they're both informational items only. So there's an update to the shop guidelines, and then right after it, there is the draft 2022 shop. The guidelines is it's a commission item, and we've been working with Caltrans on updating the shop guidelines. And just there's no groundbreaking changes, but there are some changes that we've been working with Caltrans on. There's some things that we're trying to do to increase a little bit of earlier engagement on shop projects. We're trying to clarify some complete streets and bike and ped stuff in there. We threw some language in there about CAPDI and equity and stuff like that. So it's kind of some updating to current events in the shop guidelines. We just looking backwards, we did have a workshop this last Friday. And I apologize to some of you, I know it overlapped the Rural Counties Task Force meeting if any of you guys were there. That was a workshop to gather input from other people other than just Caltrans, which was great. And then moving forward, we're going to present these draft changes at the January meeting. And then the anticipation is that at the March CTC meeting, the new guidelines will be adopted. That is kind of running parallel to the other thing that's on the January agenda, which is the draft 2022 shop. And that will be a presentation by Caltrans about kind of what's in the shop. Hopefully you all had a chance to review and provide comment on the shop when it got distributed back in December and then earlier this month. And so hopefully you guys have been able to give input on that and then provide your comments. We will see your comments at the end of January 31st is when Caltrans provides the whole entire shop to the CTC. But at the commission meeting, just keep your eye out. It's going to be James Anderson and Mike Johnson, and they're going to give a high-level overview of what's in this proposed shop document and kind of the direction that it's going. And then looking forward beyond that, CTC will start doing our review of this shop that Caltrans has developed. And one of the things that we're required to do by statute is a hearing. And this year, since we're doing it virtual, and so we're supposed to have a North and a South hearing, and we're combining them all into one virtual hearing on Wednesday, February 16th from 9 a.m. to noon. So I'd encourage you, that will be another time where I'll give a short presentation. Caltrans will give a little bit more of an in-depth presentation of how the shop was developed and what's in the shop and how they, what the makeup of it is. So tune in, and I would say in the first 30 to 45 minutes, you'll hear from Caltrans, and maybe not quite 45 minutes, but whatever it is, they'll give a presentation on that. And then there'll be an opportunity for public input and public comment, which we would like to hear from everybody on what your comments or responses are to the document they've put out. So that's that. And then our anticipation is that we'll bring it forward for adoption at the March CTC meeting. So they're both kind of running on two parallel paths, draft information items this month, and then adoption of guidelines and the shop in March. And that's it.
All right. Thank you, John. Hey, Matthew, are you ready for an SB1 program update? And might I be able to ask you please to be brief if possible? We're running just a little bit behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I can be very brief. So just wanted to let you all know regarding the SB1 programs, LPP, congested corridors and trade corridors. We did hold an incorporating equity workshop back on December 16th. I wanted to just thank this group for participating and sharing some ideas on how the commission staff can work integrating equity into our guidelines process and project selection process. I'll just say the feedback that we received and continue to be receiving will be considered and incorporated into actual guidelines changes for all three SB1 competitive programs, and we'll start sharing that publicly later this spring. I'll also say this will be an agenda item at the February 3rd Equity Advisory Roundtable, so that's next Thursday. And these efforts will also be a second standalone SB1 program workshop later on this spring, which I do hope to share the actual draft language in advance of, so we can hopefully have a conversation about that. Really brief plug for the office hours that my team put out. These are not going to be as robust or hands-on, I think, as the active transportation site visits. However, my team is interested in talking with prospective applicants to LPP, congested corridors, or trade corridor enhancement program, if there are any specific questions applicants might have. So we put out notices for these office hours, how to sign up a couple weeks ago through the CTC distribution list. But if you do have any questions or didn't receive that, feel free to send me an email and I'll make sure we get you the correct form. Other than that, no other SB1 competitive program updates, but Cherry Zamora with Local Streets and Roads, if I can have her give like a very brief update on LSR, where we're at, and then I think that will conclude the SB1 stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Cherry. I will just be giving an update for Alicia. So we just finished up expenditure reporting. Expenditure reports were due December 1st. And we're happy to say that for the third year in a row, we're able to get 100% compliance, meaning all of the 539 jurisdictions were able to submit their expenditure reports to us. So some of our preliminary numbers, as of early January, we see that 4,000 projects were accounted for, and about 2,500 of those projects were in progress or completed in fiscal year 21. And approximately 861 million in RMRA funds were expended. So those numbers are in line with what we've seen in previous years. As a final point, we just want to thank everybody who kind of helped us out in getting in contact with various jurisdictions and getting everybody to 100% compliance. So right now our staff is continuing to work on additional edits and just some cleanup, and we'll be providing our final numbers at the March Commission meeting. So if anybody has any questions, I'm available.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to just go ahead and move straight on to Kathleen Hanley, who is here from Caltrans to talk to us about the ITSP RTP addendum and planned stakeholder meetings.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm going to keep it quick. For those of you who don't know, we are doing an addendum to the newly adopted 2021 ITSP. I just sort of kicked off this addendum process. It will wrap up in December of this year, so a year-long effort. The point of the addendum is to identify the specific needs of each of the interregional corridors in more detail than was in the 2021 ITSP document. So the most important thing for you to know about right now is that there are going to be 11 stakeholder meetings, one for each of the strategic interregional corridors. I've included in what Don sent out with the agenda, the list of the dates and times for each of the interregional corridors. The meetings are planned to be 90 minutes. They'll include all of you all as regions, any of your transit operators, rail JPAs, and I'm working with the district planning staff to identify a contact list for who should be invited to the meetings. But of course, I am happy to take them directly from you all as well. So if there's folks you definitely want to make sure are at the table for certain meetings, please just send me an email. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I will quickly answer some questions by saying no new priority interregional facilities are going to be designated as part of this addendum process update, and major changes to the scoring criterion for ITIP are not expected. However, the document in general is expected to help guide the next round of ITIP investment.
I see Mike has his hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, Kathleen, Mike Woodman with Nevada County Transportation Commission. Your previous presentation to the Rural Counties Task Force, you kind of highlighted some of the key areas of information that you plan to supplement on the corridors. Definitely supportive of that. You also clarified that this kind of addendum update is an effort to address CTC's request for additional information on these corridors. And in that light, I just want to say that I support identifying the gaps that remain in these corridors. If there are planned improvements within these corridors, it's important for us to know, how close these corridors are to being completed, and if there's projects planned for them. It's a regional priority and a focus for us. So I would just add that input. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments for Kathleen? That attachment went out with the rest of the documents this morning that you should all have received. All right, thank you, Kathleen. Next, we have Tony Dang to talk about the Caltrans Complete Streets policy update.
Thanks, Dawn, and I'll share my screen. And apology to those of you who attended the Rural Counties Task Force meeting because it's the same presentation. Dawn, it looks like I can't share my screen, but I can just talk through it if for the sake of time. So I think a lot of questions that we've been getting around the Complete Streets policy is why now? And so as a department, we've really been working to center our work around 3 foundational principles around climate action, equity, and safety. We've worked to integrate that into our department's strategic plan, as well as foundational documents like the California Transportation Plan 2050. And part and parcel of that approach is how we integrate complete streets into our work. I think additionally, the federal and state policy landscape has changed, including through agency's CAPTI document, which calls for investment in safe and connected walking and biking networks. So all that to say, this is kind of the direction the department has been headed towards over the past several years. And I think the stars aligned in terms of starting updating our policy to start a new chapter in the department's work on complete streets. Next slide. And so what is in the policy? So I wanted to pull out kind of the key pieces of the policy. At its core, it's really around establishing for the department an organizational wide priority to encourage and maximize walking, biking, and I think the new pieces around transit and passenger rail. And here you'll see the kind of operative piece of the policy, which is in locations where there is expected pedestrian, bike, or transit needs, that all projects that are funded by or overseen by the department will provide comfortable, convenient, and connected complete streets facilities unless an exception is documented and approved. And so in terms of that exception process, we have an existing process developed through our Complete Streets decision document and accompanying guidance. We'll be working to update that to align that with the new policy. And that covers primarily our shop projects. We are also in the process of developing a parallel process and procedure for our highway maintenance projects. Next slide. So we've also gotten a lot of questions around, what's different about this policy. So I think the key things to highlight here are, whereas the old policy was a deputy directive and kind of sets a course of action, the director's policy is really around signaling that fundamental direction for our department. I think, secondly, the old policy was a little soft in terms of encouraging our staff to take opportunities to improve mobility for all users. And here, what you'll see in our new director's policy is that we're really looking to change the default expectation with our project teams. So by default, we want walking, biking, and transit facilities to be included in projects. And in instances where they do not make sense or they just simply cannot be integrated, we're elevating that kind of formal decision making to an executive level through our district directors. You'll also see that, as I mentioned, there's an increased commitment to transit and rail that I think was absent from our last policy. And we've expanded the roles and responsibilities to help provide our staff with additional guidance and direction. Next slide. I also wanted to spend a little bit of time just kind of pulling out some of the key highlights from the policy. So there's commitment in the policy around partnering with communities and our agencies. And really this piece is around ensuring that the projects that Caltrans implements connects to and increases access to destinations to existing planned and local and regional pedestrian, bike, and transit networks. And then there's also a commitment to strengthen our agency partnerships. I think this is very much an acknowledgement that we hear from folks quite often that our policies and procedures may be a little bit cumbersome. And so we recognize that, and we're committing through this policy to working towards identifying and removing those barriers. Next slide. We also use the policy as an opportunity to really embed the core concept around design flexibility, and we'll be working to educate and train our staff to really maximize the use of design flexibility so that they are designing context-sensitive solutions and delivering these multimodal projects that fit the community's needs and context. Lastly, there is a commitment in the policy to really prioritize our underserved communities and to really embed an equity focus into our work. Next slide. So we know a policy is only as good as its implementation. And so we as a department have identified a handful of very high priority actions that we're committed to taking to see implementation of the policy through in the near term. So the centerpiece of our implementation effort will be centered around this new, what we're calling contextual design guidance. And so with this design guidance, what we're looking to do is to detail from the department's perspective so that we can set expectations with our staff, what the minimum expectations for different complete streets facilities are, and to organize that by place type, because I think we fully recognize that the needs in, say, a suburban neighborhood setting are very different from a core downtown setting. So we want to kind of spell that out in much more detail than what's currently in the policy. Next slide. Again, this issue around design flexibility. So we'll be working with our project teams to help them understand the concept and help them to really embrace this. Next slide. I mentioned already that we're planning to update our complete streets decision document. So ensuring that that executive level district director sign off will be required. And one thing I'll mention here is that, the complete streets decision document process is something that is relatively new to the department. We rolled it out early last year. And so we will be kind of evaluating the implementation of this process, and we'll definitely be revisiting it in the future to address any challenges or issues we see as we work towards implementing it. Next slide. And as I mentioned earlier, we are actively working to develop this complete streets tracking form process for our HM1 and 3 projects. We're aiming to complete this within the next few weeks and aiming to have this new requirements apply starting with fiscal year 22-23 HM projects. Next slide. We'll also be working to launch an internal hub to again assist with that training of our staff to ensure that they are getting the training and resources that they need and that our different functions are working and collaborating with one another so that they are well equipped to work with you all to deliver complete streets facilities across the life cycle of the project. And last slide. And lastly, we recognize that these are just a handful of key actions and that there are likely many more actions that the department needs to take on to ensure successful implementation. And so we're committed to developing a public-facing complete streets action plan that will be capturing these and additional actions. We'll be using this to monitor progress and we'll be developing quarterly progress reports that we will be issuing publicly. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but very excited to partner with you all to advance walking, biking, and transit in the state. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tony. Does anybody have, Rachel has her hand up. Go ahead, Rachel.
Just a quick question. Our district planner recently reminded us about the smart mobility framework that I think Caltrans developed maybe a year or two ago. And I was just curious how this effort parallels that or integrates with that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so we definitely don't want to reinvent the wheel. So the smart mobility framework has done a good job in terms of taking kind of that land use perspective in transportation. And so it's spelled out those different place types already. So we're looking to take those place types identified in the smart mobility framework and then flesh out what those complete streets facilities would look like in those different place types.
Sarkis?
Hi, Tony. Thank you for the presentation and congratulations on your appointment by the governor to your new role. I did want to say I appreciate the, I think it was the 4th or 5th slide about the district director having discretion over some of the decisions. So thank you for that. And then on the action plans, are those going to be at the district level or is that going to be a headquarters level plan?
It will be a headquarters spearheaded effort, but we are anticipating engaging all of our districts to kind of help structure some of the kind of key actions that need to occur both at the headquarters level as well as the districts.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments for Tony? All right, if not, I'm going to go ahead and take things a little out of order because we're running behind, but I think this Caltrans project prioritization for SB1 cycle 3 is something that we all need to hear about before we get too far into the springtime. So I'm going to ask Angel if she is ready.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do you mind if I share my screen?
Nope. Did I update you? Let's see. Yep, there you go.
All right, here we are. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. All right, so hopefully it's not in the notes. Hopefully it's in the actual. Here we go. Okay. So my name is Angel Pyle. I have the privilege of being the SB1 program manager for the department. So many familiar names and faces here. So for those of you, hi, and for those of you I haven't met, I look forward to meeting you one day in the future. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the department's prioritization as we move into the congested corridor and trade corridor proposals. Due to time, I will truncate my presentation a little bit, but if nothing else, what I want to leave you guys with is an open door, if you will, an open virtual door. So you can always reach out to me with any questions, and I'm happy to spend any time explaining anything that you'd like. So today I'd like to give a brief overview of how we're going into this process. And I also want to give you a reminder of the prioritization purpose. So just as a reminder for any, it's in the CTC's guidelines that for any agencies that are submitting more than one application or nomination or project or proposal, that those need to be prioritized. And Caltrans is fortunate enough to have a multitude of partnerships across the state, which we truly value and appreciate, and we want to continue those partnerships. And part of our commitment to those partnerships is also ensuring that we are prioritizing projects transparently. And so that's something that we're committed to as we go into this particular cycle. And so, so that is part of what I'm here today to talk about. One thing in terms of the use that I do want to clarify, I don't want this to get mixed up with the commission's review process. This is entirely separate from the commission's review process. This is purely how Caltrans is going into this process, and we'll be looking to prioritize our nominations, both Caltrans, solely Caltrans applications, or our preference is also partnerships. So, and we'll be putting those types of projects through the same prioritization. So I just want to make sure that we don't get any of that mixed up. This is completely separate. And then also I'll cover the current status of the scoring rubrics, if you will. Okay, so here is an overview of what the scoring rubrics, what the subject matters of those will be. So we'll have 13 different scoring rubrics. What you'll see is the first 10, or actually the first 9 rather, align entirely with CAPTI. So it was perfect for this presentation to follow Tony's, because I'm going to reaffirm our commitment to CAPTI, and that will be very much apparent in our SB, in how we're going to prioritize our SB1 project nominations. This again is internal for any of our projects or for partner projects. We have 13 criteria, or 13 scoring rubrics right now. So I mentioned that the first 9 correlate with CAPTI. We also have one about leveraging funds, because that is a key, of course, in some of how projects are evaluated. Also, if you're not on mute, if you could just a reminder to mute yourself, that'd be great. The last, thank you, Don, appreciate that. The last 3 different criteria that you'll see are primarily focused on goods movement. So that applies specifically to the trade corridor program. So one of the things that the department is looking towards is really making sure that we're looking at robust solutions for freight movement or goods movement within our trade corridor proposals. And we have some criteria that reflects that alignment. One thing I do want to reiterate here is that this is an iterative process. This is not cast in stone. This is not something that's final at this point. I put a big draft sticky note on here just to let folks know we are evaluating and we are refining, and this will be an iterative process as we move on. We have been very highly engaged with our district partners in all of this, and we have feedback from many of our districts that we're still reviewing. We've already made changes to the rubrics and modifications based on that feedback. So we are taking all of the feedback that we are receiving seriously, and we're looking at each of those piece by piece. So please make sure that you're engaging with your district counterparts if you have any questions or comments during this process, or you can also call me as well. So here's a sample of what we're looking at. So I'm not going to go through all of them, because there's 13 of them. So we're not going to go through all of those, but this is just to give you an idea. We worked with a lot of subject matter experts in the department, and for each one of those different evaluation criteria that were on the previous slide, we have scoring from anywhere from 1 to 5, 5 meaning a high score, and we have specific attributes for each one of those different criteria that a project needs to evaluate well on or score on in order to score high in that particular area. And there's lots of different perspectives with this. So we, of course, have freight considerations, and we also have rural considerations as well, because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And we recognize that it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so we have tried to make this very dynamic and responsive to different projects that are great projects, but may not necessarily score well if they're only just given this kind of, square peg round hole sort of thing. And so we've really tried to be very cognizant of that and adjusting our matrix accordingly. So this is just an example for you. We don't have all of the levels, but just you can also work with your district counterparts and you can get some more information that way as well. Or again, you can always contact me too. But this is what we have for each one of the criteria. So in terms of next steps, like I mentioned, we are incorporating and incorporating feedback rather and finalizing. Sorry, I'm still recovering from a cold last week. And so, well, actually COVID. And so I'm just kind of still coming out of that. So sorry, I'm not 100% running on all cylinders at this point. So we're still incorporating the feedback and we're finalizing those. We hope to finalize the matrices very, very quickly. There's a little bit of feedback that we still want to work through to make sure that we have responded to all of those points. And once we get that done, we'll be prepared to finalize the matrices and send those back out. I also want to just reiterate that this is an iterative approach, both to the matrices and how we are in the scoring rubrics and how we're evaluating those, as well as when we start working on projects and we have this back and forth dialogue. Really just want to iterate that it is an iterative process and we want to work with you on this to make projects successful, because if projects succeed with this, we all succeed. Lastly, if we have any question, we'll go into the prioritization after the projects are really submitted. So I think everybody knows that that's February 1st. We're going to start some more conversations. We're going to review eligibility, those types of things. And then we'll be prioritizing somewhat after that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. I'm happy to take questions here too, as long as what Don will allow me to with the schedule. And then also I'm always available, whether it's phone, I can add my phone number to this slide here, and then also send that to Don. And you can also contact your local district folks as well. And any of us are happy to answer those questions.
All right, thank you, Angel. I think we'll just take a couple of quick questions and then move on in interest of time, but I see Sarkis and Adrian have their hands up.
Sure.
Hi, Angel, hope you're feeling better. The question I have is, and thank you for sharing this. I understand that you guys have an internal process, but this is really helpful and appreciated. What is considered, can you share what is considered rural?
Sure. Let me get back with you on that definition, because we did work with many subject matter experts in the department. So the definition of rural is somewhat, I don't want to say it's dynamic, but I wouldn't say it's also cast in stone either. So we can make some considerations. And I know that there's some uniquenesses in many areas of the state. So let me get back with you on exactly what that definition of rural would be.
Okay. And then I think everyone on the call knows I have no shame. So if I can make a shameless plug for completion of corridors, since that is something that the commission has in their congested corridors guidelines. But thank you again.
I appreciate the shameless plug, and that's totally fine. So I appreciate the perspective. So thank you.
Adrian.
Hi, Angel. Adrian Cardoso with OCTA. Thank you for trying to make this process as clear and transparent as possible. I've really appreciated, that you provided out dates and you have the intake form and now this rubric, I guess. But I'm a little concerned because we submitted our intake forms. They were due to our district on January 20th. And I think if we had that kind of your scoring criteria in advance, we could have maybe written things a little differently or added some information or just taken that into consideration. So right now our district is reviewing the intake forms. That's going to probably take them until February 1st. So I don't expect them to kick them back at this point. Will there be an opportunity for us to go back in, or, would you consider extending the deadline so that we can now incorporate this new information? I'm not sure, I think it could have influenced how we might have answered things, and we've already submitted it. So what would you recommend?
Sure. The first thing is that I want to reassure you, all hope is not lost. It's really not. It's okay.
Thank you.
So please don't, there's lots of things to worry about. This is not one of them. like I had mentioned, that it is an iterative process, and that's how we're looking at it. Please feel free to reach out to your district partners and say, hey, because they do have the draft scoring criteria. And the modifications that we'll be making won't be humongous. They're not going to be huge. So they should have a really good idea of what's in there. And go ahead and have that conversation. I encourage you guys to have that dialogue. And if there's something that you're looking at saying, hey, I think that we could add more here, or tell that story, because that's really something that we found that, you know, we have lots and lots of great projects. What we need to do is tell that story better and make sure that we're including all of those elements. So I would encourage you to reach out to your district counterparts and have that conversation and see if there's anything that you'd like to do to add to your project.
Okay, thank you.
And if you have any questions or anything like that, again, please feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm totally open to that.
All right, thank you, Angel. We have local assistance up next. Is Dee or Mark or some, oh, I see Mark.
Yes, I'm filling in for Dee this time. So thank you, Don, for having us on here. We do have a couple things we want to go over. We have the training day that we want to give you an update on. We definitely have the survey to go over. We want to thank you guys for the effort on the obligation policy that was going to be developed. So Sajai is going to be going over the work that's been done here on rolling out the obligation. And then as mentioned earlier, we do have 2 items that we're going to add. Agency certification update by Felicia Haslam, and then Robert Peterson's going to roll us over with some updates on the federal programs. So Kelly, I'll turn it on over to you.
Okay.
And Kelly, I just would like to ask you to keep in mind that we have just a little over 10 minutes left.
Yeah, so I'll just give the brief 2-minute update. You did want to go over the survey that we had back in December. The last couple of weeks, we did this around the holidays, so it was pretty quick, but we got some responses back on the survey, and we blended that with the post survey that we did in our September presentation of training day. And we did come up with a list of general topics that we're going to cover this next time. And one thing that we found in the survey was that there was a lot of interest in continuing on with the theme that we had in the last one, which was dates and deadlines. That ties in really close to policies and procedures of local assistance. So we're working with Felicia's and Sujaya's implementation offices to continue those training modules. We're also going, this time around, we're going to work with Gretchen Chavez in our Clean California office, who's going to provide a little background on that office, grant funding programs, and what's next for the program after the initial round or the most recent grants are awarded next month, I believe it is. And then one thing that we also noticed on the surveys was there was a need to help new employees out there get an orientation to local assistance in the division. So we're going to have a brief module on getting to know local assistance, contacts, where you get your questions answered. We're looking at doing training day on March 22nd. It's a Tuesday. It's going to be 12:30 to 4:30. We do have a flyer. I don't know, Don, if that's gone out or if it's, I think it was ready to go out. I don't know if it has.
Yep.
If there's any questions, please contact me. We're looking for a successful program. We had over 600 or close to 700 people that joined us the last time. So we're looking for another fun day. And Don, I'll throw it back to you.
All right, thank you. Yes, thanks for the save the date flyer. We went ahead and got that sent out with the RTPA invite. So if the agencies, our RTPAs want to start sharing that with their local agencies, they can do that as well.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Now, I think next we'll take Sujaya with the obligation authority policy update.
Thank you, Don. I will start with a quick update on the OA and the apportionments. We have received full year apportionments, which is good news. We still have to put some program codes into LP 2000 and FADS, so some administrative work at our end. Although we have the full year apportionments, we don't have the full year OA yet, so we're still monitoring and working within the obligation limitation. Going over to the OA policy updates, you must have seen the revised policy for this year. We had the 2009 version before this, and that policy has been updated. We shared the draft with you. If you have any comments on it, please share it with us by the end of this week. I'll give you just a brief updates or overview on what was changed in that policy. Just a minute here. So as part of the OA policy best management practices group, regions have been meeting with us for over a year now, since the last OA delivery. And we've been looking at ways to improve OA management. One of the things that we did with the policy was to add some language to improve flexibility of opening the OA pool. Right now, the OA pool opens for locals as of May 1st. But we wanted to add some language in there where we could open it earlier, say April 1st, or in March if need be, if the OA utilization is low. And this was to address a situation like the last federal fiscal year where the OA usage was very low until almost towards the end of the fiscal year. We've also added some plan to expedite or to accelerate the submittal date for obligation plans. Typically, it was April 1st. But now we want the regions to submit the plans to your district local assistance engineer by March 15th. So a 2-week expedite in that schedule. Other than that, we've clarified the language within the policy memo, added some explanation of the August redistribution process. This year, we're going to come to the regions in June and ask for potential project lists from you, so we can plan our AR ask better, and also helps deliver 100% OA with better planning. Those are the brief updates on what changes were made to that policy. If anybody has any questions, I can answer those.
Thank you, Sujaya. I really want to express my appreciation for all the work that you and your team did, but also express my appreciation to all of the regional agency representatives on that group who put a lot of time and a lot of thought and a lot of effort into updating this policy. So thank you for that. And I will open it up and ask if anybody has questions on the draft, or if they've had a chance to look, and then keep in mind trying to get any additional comments to Sujaya by the end of the week. All right, I don't see any hands raised. So do we want to go to Robert or Felicia next, whichever one of you is ready? Oh,
Hey, Dawn.
One other point that we will be applying the updated policy to managing OA this federal fiscal year.
Okay, Jose Luis.
Yeah, Don, I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure working with Sujaya and the whole team on this. I think, Sujaya, you might be working on 2.5 years now at Local Assistance, and she's been doing just a killer job, and I just want to say that. And everyone else really did a really good job participating. I'm really happy with the first major update to the OA management policy guide in 15 years or something. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, 2009 was a little bit ago.
Thank you to all the regional partners who joined me in the OABMP meeting. And we're going to continue having that as a project delivery forum. So if you have project delivery challenges which you feel like we can help address, or if you need tools from us, we can use that forum. So just throwing it out there, so you can keep me involved in those discussions as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, Felicia.
Yep, I be really fast. So an update on the agency certification. I just want to say thank you to those who took our survey last month. Out of the 18 that responded, 10 of you said you would like to be in our beta test pilot program. So I'll be reaching out soon to get that started. We are at a point where we want to start meeting with agencies to really fine tune what's going on with the program. I just need to meet with the subject matter experts in-house to make sure we're all on board. We have our plan, and meet with the DLEs of the agency we chose. We do have other agencies that have also reached out through our other stakeholder groups. So we have a lot. I thought it would be, can we get any agencies to maybe want to do this program? And we actually, now we got to see who we choose to work with us on this program, but we really appreciate it. We appreciate all the input, and the agency is really willing to help us develop these policies, procedures, and help other agencies. So that's my update. I know we can do a longer day later. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Felicia. And Robert?
All right, last but not least, I'll take it home.
Well, after you, I'm gonna still try and get in for just a minute, Paul. One
Okay,
thing on the
okay.
PE over 10 years if we can, but we'll
Okay.
see.
All right, I just got 4 items. I had 20, but I'll cut it down to 4. No, I'm just kidding. So for safety, cycle 11 is coming up this year. So let everybody know to start sharpening their pencils and start looking at their data. The call will happen in April, May, with a webinar soon followed after that. As you know, a local road safety plan is required to be eligible for funding this year. And as far as ER, emergency relief, there is some training that's going to be scheduled in April. So once that information is the information is put together by our training coordinator, that'll be sent out in a blog or the email blast. So look for that. Also, another good news is FHWA reimbursed many ER disaster events in the past. So about $64 million was basically a lot of the AC projects on 120 projects. So that covered about 10 disaster events. So that 64 million can be turned around and put to other projects because now they'll be able to get reimbursed for that. So that was really good news. So something that's been hanging around for a while. And last but not least, HIP funding, the old favorite subject of HIP. We are working with our financial programming to see which agencies have outstanding HIP shares for the 18-19 year. As you know, those will lapse in September. Once we get that information, and I'm looking to you, Jose Luis, to see which ones that don't have plans, to see if we can get those things obligated. I don't think we're as dire this year as we were last year, but we still got some work to do on that end. So I'll report more in future meetings on that. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Robert. Before I ask if there's a couple questions, Paul had to leave, but I had asked him a couple of questions and he provided me with some information. The inactive rate for the end of the quarter, December 31st, was 0.99%. So that looks pretty good. He also just mentioned very briefly that the effective date for revision to the PE over 10-year rule has not yet been determined. So he recognizes that there's an interest in finding out more about that provision of the federal bill. The other thing he wanted to mention is that they right now are gearing up to provide some additional support for the discretionary grant applications that NOFOs are soon to be issued on. So that was what he essentially had on the federal highway side. And now we'll just, it's right at 4 o'clock, but if there are any pressing questions for local assistance, we can take a couple. And I'm not seeing any hands raised. So thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you guys making your presentation so quick here at the end. There was a lot of good and meaty discussion today that needed to be had on some pressing policy topics. And so I really appreciate all the time everybody took. And our next meeting will be in March, the Tuesday before the commission meeting. This January commission meeting is 100% virtual. I am hoping to be able to do a virtual or hybrid hosting, hopefully in San Diego in March. We're set to be down here. So with that, I will see you all tomorrow at the CTC meeting.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.